centuries, Maori astronomers called Tuhunga would rise before dawn, climb a hillside, and in the early dawn of June would welcome a cluster of stars called the Matariki. The Tuhunga had trained to make meticulous calculations and observations of their position, their brilliance in the sky, in order to predict the weather for the coming year. They'd return to their communities, and together they'd make a plan. What to harvest, when to plant, where to fish. This intelligence was distributed across the entire island of Aotearoa, what we know as New Zealand. And it sustained the Maori for generations. That is until 1907, when the New Zealand colonial government passed the Tuhunga Suppression Act, and the Matariki was banned. When I wake up before dawn and I hear the latest news, I wish I had my own personal cluster of stars to tell me what is going on. I wish I could predict what was going to happen in next year with AI disruption, climate change, social isolation, and global conflict. Well, there's a word for this: polycrisis. Multiple simultaneous events that are existential and sometimes combine to produce impacts that we can't predict and we can't prepare for. And in the face of polycrisis, individual resilience is radically insufficient. But we can add to it. And the clue is the Matariki. It's called connected resilience. And there are 5 principles that can help you to navigate through polycrisis. Number 1, local sense making. The Tuhunga and their communities would come back, read the stars, and make a plan relative to their local location, because what works up in the north might be a disaster down in the south. Turns out NASA thinks the same way. We're all in awe of the Artemis. And as NASA thinks about longer space travel, they realize if there's a crisis on Mars, it takes 28 minutes to get a message to Earth and 28 minutes back. That's too late. So they've evolved their practices to allow the crew to detect, sense, and solve problems locally. Now, connected crews plus local sense-making make for resilient missions that are successful. Number 2, distributed intelligence. The Matariki was not controlled by one single body, and it's a good thing, because if that body was displaced, the Matariki might have been lost. It's kind of like the way the brain works. The brain distributes intelligence across the entire neural network. Now, as research is showing, the focus is on depth of connection and coordination of information, not executive control. I was the CEO of a tech company for 15 years, which means that I was really familiar with polycrisis. In fact, I got so familiar sometimes that I just called it Monday. But in June of 2024, we had a very intense polycrisis. We lost our largest client, we had to make a layoff, and our signature project was rumored to be canceled. What did we do? We did a pre-mortem. We gathered our teams from sales to engineering, and I asked them this question. Imagine 1 year from today, in July of 2025, you wake up to the horror of our company splashed across headlines for all the wrong reasons. What happened? People answered anonymously, but we read them all out loud. And as we heard new perspectives and new information, something unexpected happened. The room felt safer. It felt safer because we were seeing things in parallax. Parallax is seeing something more clearly, not from one perspective, but from many. And parallax is the 3rd principle of connected resilience. As we saw in Parallax, we had a greater understanding of our polycrisis, even if we were uncertain about what was going to happen. But that wasn't enough. Sometimes it's really tempting to resolve that uncertainty by just collapsing into one perspective and moving forward with an action plan. I've done it. This time we didn't. We took those multiple perspectives and brought them together between what we knew and what we didn't know. That space between what's known and unknown is called a penumbra. And the penumbra is the fourth principle. The reason is the penumbra is where we learn. It's the space of learning. And as we learned, we created 2 new practices that enabled us to navigate through that polycrisis. After that, we repeated the pre-mortem every quarter. And so can you. Think about your community or your family or your company. Imagine, 1 year from today, you're in the headline for all the best reasons. And then you're in a headline for all the worst reasons. Bring them together and help people see both in parallax. And then come together in a penumbra. And I guarantee there is something new that you will learn and you will be able to create to navigate through your polycrisis. So now we have 4 of the 5 principles of connected resilience: local sense-making, distributed intelligence, parallax, and penumbra. For the 5th, we need to go back to the Matariki. When the Suppression Act was passed, the Tuhunga went underground. They continued making their observations and passing their knowledge to the next generation through story and ritual. Story and ritual is the 5th principle. As humans, we're all connected through story. And the Maori turned this into ritual that enabled them to be resilient for all those years. And it's a good thing. The Suppression Act was repealed 55 years later. It was recognized by the scientific community after the Maori revived the Matariki. And in 2022, it was made a national holiday across New Zealand, an official holiday. If you're inspired by the story of the Matariki, pre-mortem, or NASA, I hope you can see that the principles of connected resilience are widespread and they're powerful. In 1992, I'm sitting hot and humid in a bungalow waiting my first New Orleans Jazz Fest. My friend Matt knocks on the door and he hands me a book, The Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. He knew I was trying to learn how to meditate and I wasn't very good at it. But I read that book cover to cover that weekend. And I was thinking of that when I was doing research for this project. Thich Nhat Hanh said, the next Buddha might not take the form of an individual, but rather a community. And that is the most important thing we can do for the survival of our planet. That feels like a lot of work. So let me ask you a question. When you think of your community, your family, or company, do you know where your eyes and ears are, making sense of your polycrisis? Is that intelligence distributed or is it blocked? As a leader, are you in a position to help people see in parallax from multiple perspectives, and can you bring them together in that space of learning and creativity? And if so, will you tell a new story and tell that in the form of a ritual that will last? I hope so. Because the world can't wait for individual resilience to solve our polycrisis. Let's use connected resilience so we can get the wisdom from all of us.